What's up, guys? Today we're going to check out what's going on with the asylum seeker situation in Japan. It's a hot political potato in that country. Even the prime minister actually had to make a statement. Prime Minister Ishiba said, "Ruru ma moranai gaikokujin to kyosei wa dekinai." That is, we can't live together with foreigners who don't follow the rules. What is crazy about the situation, though, is how few people we're actually talking about. From a European perspective, it's almost baffling how so few migrants can cause so many problems. So we're going to check out where these people came from and how they ended up all the way over in Japan in the first place, what the news media is saying about it, what people on Twitter are saying, and we're also going to check out what the government is actually doing about the situation. But before we do, if you want to see more Japan-related content, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. My name is Ludwig. I'm your local friendly Swedish member of parliament. Let's go. Our first story comes from the Sankei Shimbun. This is a center-right conservative newspaper. The headline reads, "Exclusive. The Kurdish population of Kawaguchi city increasing rapidly to 2,500 people. Asylum visa, quote unquote, increasing 160% in just 6 months. People are spilling over to other cities." So this article is about Japan's first asylum seeker dominated neighborhood. Now, if you're European, you know exactly what this is. If you're Japanese, probably not so much. This is a new phenomenon in that country. The newspaper writes that the number of people who came with Turkish passports to apply for asylum reached a record high the year before, 2,400 people. And the reason why so many people are coming is because of something called Tokute Katsudo. Now, Tokute Katsudo is a type of permit that you can obtain as an asylum seeker that allows you to work full-time during the asylum process, which can take years, obviously. And because of this opportunity to access the labor market, a lot of people are coming to claim asylum. The newspaper draws the conclusion here that people who are aiming to be dekasegi, that is labor migrants, are abusing the asylum system to access the labor market. Now, this has caused a lot of friction with the local people in Kawaguchi, so much so that even the Kurdish population here is talking about leaving. It says, "Kawaguchi wa sumitsurai to kanji." It's difficult living here, says one person. And another person says, "I'm leaving Kawaguchi." Now, let's have a look where this place is on the map. The asylum seeker dominated area is here around Warabi Station. Kawaguchi City is here. And this is Tokyo. Now, this Kawaguchi City and Warabi is in Saitama Prefecture, so it's not Tokyo Prefecture, but it's very close. You can probably commute to the city in about 30 or 40 minutes, so you can definitely live there and still work in the city. So, how did all these Kurdish people end up in Japan in the first place? It's a pretty long trip. Again, we go to the Sankei Shimbun for an explanation. The headline reads, "Asylum seekers are all liars." Pretty blunt. They're coming to Japan to work. 80% of the asylum seekers in Kawaguchi City comes from only 3 provinces in Turkey. And when you break this down in the article, you find out that not only do they all come from just 3 provinces, we're actually talking about 4 to 5 villages where almost all these asylum seekers come from. This newspaper actually did send a journalist to go all the way to Kurdistan to investigate, see what's going on. Why are these people coming to Japan? Are they oppressed? Is there a war going on? What is happening? The first thing he noticed when he came there was that there's a lot of nice houses in this area. The province overall, maybe not that nice, but in this area, a lot of nice houses. The explanation for why so many people are able to go is because Japan and Turkey has a short-term stay visa exemption treaty. That is, if you can only afford the plane ticket, and if you only have a passport, then you can go to Japan and you can apply for asylum and you can stay longer that way. So the question is then, why are so many people coming? This headline says, 逃亡からの迫害ない. We're not being oppressed by our own. And in the article, the journalist has interviewed the head of a village. He's 58 years old. And he says that out of 1,180 people in his village, about 100 people are in Japan. There's about 10% of the whole village is in Japan. Everyone is going there for employment. It's only purely for economic reasons. If one person goes, then it's easier for his family and friends to go along with him. The journalist then interviews a plumber who has been working in Japan for 13 years and who speaks really good Japanese. And he explains that, are we refugees? No, it's all lies. Everyone here is good at lying. Okay, points for honesty, I guess. The journalist then asks, but when you go to the asylum office, you tell them that if you are sent back, you're going to get killed or you're going to end up in prison. Isn't that what you say? It's all lies. Everything is a lie. Everyone is going to Japan to work, to save up some money and then come back. We're not being oppressed in our own country. The journalist then asks, what about the Kurdish security police? What about the Kurdish Kempetai? So they're using the same word here as the old Japanese security police, but the Kurdish security or the Turkish security police. Aren't you afraid of them? Why should we be afraid? In this area, it's all Kurds. Most people are Kurdish, even in the security police or in the police. Almost everyone is Kurdish. Why should we be oppressed by our own people? We're not being oppressed by our own people. Okay, very interesting. So not a lot of reasons for actually claiming asylum, except that you want to go work in Japan. Now, this suspicion that most people who go to Japan to claim asylum are actually just looking to find a job is also confirmed in a memo from an actual government agency. If you Google something called Dekasegi Hokokusho, the report on labor migrants, you will find that it's been widely written about in the media. It's been reported on a bunch of times. This memo is old. It's about 20 years old at this point. But where the government agencies themselves are actually confirming that people are not coming to Japan to escape persecution, they are coming to find a job. So this idea does not just come from this newspaper, it's been confirmed by the government itself. So what are the consequences of allowing that many asylum seekers into your country? Well, this news story has been all over the news in Japan. The headline reads, 100 Kurdish people storms hospital and shuts down the emergency room for 5.5 hours. Okay, the newspaper reports, the thing seems to have started as a fight over a woman. At 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the evening, one person with a Turkish nationality, a Turkish passport, who was in his 20s, was assaulted on the street by a bunch of other guys of Turkish nationality. The victim was cut with a sharp object and he was then sent to the hospital. Now, after the victim was sent to the hospital, friends and family of both parties found out about the situation and they all gathered at the hospital for a massive brawl. The police came to the scene of the crime, and the city actually had to activate something called the Kidotai, it's the riot police. And 2 people were arrested on suspicion of assaulting a police officer, and 4 more people were arrested on suspicion of murder. So pretty bad. Here's another story. This one is from the Bunshun Online. driving without a license. And since this is YouTube, we have to call it Bekshul Basalt. The Kurdish problem, reasons for the chaos. Now this is a longer article about the whole situation. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but we are going to have a look at one particular story that's been all over the news in Japan. This is about a 14-year-old kid, a Kurdish guy, and he was smoking cigarettes and playing loud music in a place where he was not allowed to be. A security guard kindly asked him to please go somewhere else, which he did, but he soon came back, and when he came back, he brought something called enmaku hanabi, which is, I guess, some kind of firework, a smoke screen fireworks, perhaps these ones. And he committed an attempted arson. Obviously, very, very serious situation. The newspaper concludes in the headline here that this is hurting the image of Kurdish people, which I totally believe. Here's another situation that's gotten a lot of attention. In the whole school, more or about half of all the students are foreigners. The largest part are Chinese, and the second largest group are Kurdish. This comes from Share News Japan. This is an online publication that kind of soaks up what people are talking about online and then writes newspaper articles about it. It's pretty interesting. Now, again, if you're European, this is probably very familiar to you. You've probably seen an area like this in the country where you live. In Japan, this is very unusual, and the reactions are what you might expect. This newspaper sums up the feelings and comments of the local people. People are worried about the burden on public services. Doesn't this cost a lot of money? The taxpayer perspective is very common. People are asking, why should we pay a bunch of taxes for services for people from completely different countries who have no reason to be here whatsoever? There's also a little summary here of reactions on the internet, and the newspaper also concludes that a lot of the reactions toward this comes online and not necessarily in the major established publications. So it says nettojo no hanno, so reactions on the internet. And people are saying, why should we have consideration for illegals? Obviously, the taxpayers are stupid. The tax money that we're paying are being openly wasted. One city, 300 people? That's weird. Maybe this is worse than I thought it would be. This is crazy. Too many. I'm leaving. The illegals should not have rights. So obviously, also, if you're European, you probably recognize this. The reaction to this type of policy comes mainly on the internet and perhaps not so much in the established newspapers. All right, let's have a look at what people are saying on X. Here is a very common situation, pictures of trash being left in the wrong place. Now, this might not sound like a big issue to you, but in Japan, trust me, putting your trash in the right place is very, very important. I have made this mistake myself. I put the trash in the wrong place and I've been chewed out by my neighbors a bunch of times, but I actually did try to correct my behavior and put the trash in the right place. Now, this person writes that these people are putting the garbage where it's not supposed to be. These are Kurdish people doing this. They're not improving, they're not thinking, and so on and so on. He's a bit upset, and you can see here people are putting up signs in Turkish or Kurdish. Please don't put your trash here. It says, Gomidashi wa ruru mamotte. Stick to the rules for throwing out the trash. Another thing that's been very common is car accidents. People driving without licenses and people also crashing their cars. Now, the reason for this is partly because it's very easy to trade in your own driver's license from your home country for a Japanese license. It's very easy to do that these days, and it's causing a lot of problems because people are allowed to drive even though they didn't actually go through an exam in Japan. So this is quite common, and here this is a company, the car belongs to a company that employs a lot of Kurdish people, and so this is how the person draws the conclusion that this has to be a Kurdish person who crashed the car. Here's another picture of an unsecured load. This is obviously highly illegal and dangerous, and the person says, yeah, and they have their own hashtag. This is a hashtag Kurdokar, Kurdish car. And this is on the highway. The car in front is driving at high speed. The driver looks like he's from the Middle East. Don't get up on the Shuto highway. Don't get on the highway, guys. Be careful. Here's another video that's been going around the internet. What's going on here? Okay, we're partying. We're blowing up fireworks in the residential area. Guys, if you're ever in Japan, don't do this. If the goal here is to get the Japanese people to absolutely hate your guts, congratulations, you did it. This would be the best way to go about it. Of course, Japanese people hate loud noises and stuff that disturbs them. This is absolutely the dumbest thing if you want to live in that country. Let's see what this person is saying. She's saying, okay. So the one step towards getting rid of the visa exemption for Turkish people is to spread the truth of the Kurdish people here in Japan. Okay. Here's another thing you see a lot on social media. Obviously, Japanese people love putting up signs. If someone in the neighborhood makes a small mistake with whatever, there will be a sign up to correct that person. So, to be fair here, this is not something that only happens to Kurdish people. Japanese people do this to each other all the time. Now, this sign is obviously made in Turkish so that other people will understand. Please don't throw away the trash, and please don't do this in public, which you should obviously not do. Here's another story that's been all over the internet. The headline reads, "The quiet wish of the Kurdish women of Saitama. We want to learn Japanese." And the answer to their wish came in the form of a book. And this is from the Tokyo Shimbun. So this is a little bit more of a left-leaning liberal newspaper. So what is this about? There is an association of volunteers that have created a phrase book to help Kurdish women learn Japanese. This book is called Kitap. Kitap means book in Turkish. And the strategy here is to use real conversations in order to give practical advice to the Kurdish women on what to say and which words to use. So it says here, 実際の相談を反映させた実践的な内容が特徴. So the book is characterized to reflect real conversations between Kurdish women and Japanese women. So after this book was published, a lot of people started asking, okay, so what is in this book? What are these real conversations that are being reflected? And one person even got a hold of a copy and started taking pictures. This section is meant to reflect a conversation between a Kurdish woman called Hesaru and two Japanese women called Yuri and Sakiko. And a Kurdish woman says, I forgot to buy cigarettes for my husband, so he started beating me. This is not funny. This is obviously terrible. The conversation continues. Sakiko is asking, Heisaru-san, does your husband beat you a lot? And Heisaru-san says, sometimes when my husband gets angry, he beats me. And Sakiko says, what? That's DV, domestic violence. In Japanese, DV means domestic violence. They don't have their own word for domestic violence. And then Yuri, the other Japanese lady, says, Heisaru-san, we have to go to the hospital. You need to go to something called DV Sodan, which is a conversation about domestic violence, probably at the social welfare office or something like that. And then Heisaru says, I don't know, demo. So what's so striking about this, I mean, if you are European, you're well familiar with gender-based violence in migrant communities. It's very common. This is commonly called honor violence, where men are using violence to prevent women from integrating into European society or doing something that goes against the rules of the family or the clan. But what's so striking about this is the fact that we're only talking about 2,500 people in Japan, and they already have this type of problem. I mean, in Sweden, we have hundreds of thousands of people from this part of the world. And of course, we have the same kind of situation, but it's enough, apparently, with 2,500 people, and you're already starting to see the same kinds of problems. And speaking of gender-based violence, there have been a few instances of men belonging to this group of Kurdish people who have been arrested for some pretty serious offenses. Here is one such example. So this person is only a suspect, obviously, and is to be regarded as innocent until proven guilty. So what happened was that he met a Japanese lady who was walking on the street, and he grabbed her arm and pulled her into a park and did, well, you understand. Another aspect of this problem that is becoming more and more obvious is the financial cost. At the end of last month, the Japanese parliament actually adopted a supplementary budget, a Hosei Yosan, adding 8.3 billion yen to the budget in order to actually expel people who are not allowed to be in Japan. And in this bill, specifically, they pointed out the Kurdish group. They're looking to expel 1,098 people who should not be staying in the country. Obviously, again, if you're European, this is something you recognize. Bringing in asylum seekers also brings a lot of costs. So, last but not least, we're going to have a look at what the government is going to do about this situation. Now, in this article, we can read about the two different actions that the government is likely to take. There are basically two options for the Japanese government to deal with this situation. Either here, the black field here, Bisa Menjo Ichiji Teishi, that is a temporary suspension of visa-free travel, of the Visa Exemption Treaty. And the blue field here, Bisa Shuto Kansho Sochi. That means a visa recommendation policy, or a recommendation to obtain a visa policy. So what does this mean? Well, the two actions have been used before. The first one is pretty easy to understand. You can no longer travel to Japan without a visa. The second one is a recommendation that you obtain a visa before going to Japan. And what this means in practice is that if you show up without a visa, you will be subject to enhanced screening. They're going to check you out. They're going to see what's going on. And there is a high likelihood that you will be denied entry into the country. So this recommendation is sort of a strong recommendation. If this is the recommendation towards your country, then that's absolutely what you should do. Now, Japan has had similar problems in the past. For example, the first option, suspending the visa exemption treaty, was applied towards Pakistan, and that was in Heisei Gennen. So that was the first year in the Heisei era. Now this is the imperial Japanese calendar, so that's 1990. Same thing happened to Bangladesh in the same year, the first year of the Heisei calendar. And the same thing happened to Iran in year number 4 of the Heisei calendar, so that's 1994. Now, the other option, the visa recommendation policy, was applied to Peru in Heisei 7, so that's 1997, but it's set to expire in Reiwa 7, the current imperial era, Reiwa number 7, that's actually this year, 2025. So it's going to get easier to go to Japan if you are from Peru this year. Now, the same policy was also implemented towards Colombia in Heisei number 16. Okay, so did this have any effect? Yes, it absolutely did. When Japan had similar problems in the past, using these two options reduced the number of people who traveled and stayed illegally in Japan in order to work. So these policies absolutely work. Now, what is the government going to do? This issue was brought up in Parliament in the Budget Committee. And the answer from the members of Parliament came from a bureaucrat and not a cabinet minister. This is sort of a strange system that they have in Japan, that in an open session in committee, questions are not answered by the cabinet minister, but by an employee, a bureaucrat, in this case a diplomat. Kind of a strange system, but it's a different country, different culture. And he is not giving any straight answers. He's saying that the government is basically considering its options and seeing what they're going to do, but he does not want to cancel the visa exemption treaty with Turkey. It says here, the visa exemption treaty is good for the bilateral, it adds to the bilateral relations between the two countries, so we don't see a need to canceling it. But using the other options, the visa recommendation strategy, perhaps the government is considering it. So, why does Japan allow this to happen? Well, the real answer here is not because of the bilateral relations, obviously. The real answer is that a lot of Japanese businesses need people to fill vacancies. The Japanese labor market is incredibly hungry for foreign labor. It's very, very easy to get a job in Japan if you can actually make it there, if you can stay there legally. Getting a job is no problem at all, at least if you can speak a little bit of Japanese. And that's really what's going on here. The Japanese business community desperately needs these people, and that's why you still have the possibility to travel to Japan fairly easily. Now, what does this whole situation say about our chances in Europe to deal with the same problems? Obviously, we have the same types of problems. We have areas in our cities that are completely dominated by asylum seekers. They're causing all kinds of problems. You probably recognize half the stuff I've been talking about in this video. Well, I would say that the outlook is pretty bleak, because if a small community of only 2,500 people can cause this type of problems, then the hundreds of thousands of people that we have in Europe are also obviously going to be much more difficult to deal with. I think it also says something about the argument that the problem in migration is our own policy. Some people claim that the problems that Europe is having is because our own integration policy isn't good enough, and that we're not being clear enough about our values, and that we have perhaps too many migrants, and that's why the integration policy doesn't work. I think the Japanese example proves the opposite, that it really doesn't matter how many people from this part of the world that you take in. Only 2,500 people is enough to cause all of these problems. That's probably the takeaway from this whole situation. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.